ready here, so did everyone hear my earlier comments or no? No? Okay, so I'll start at the beginning, pardon me. Welcome to the Finance and Corporate Services Committee. This is the public input session where members of the public get to make formal delegation to City Council with respect to the proposed budget. There are two people registered for today's session. We do have two public input sessions for the first time in my time, which I think is a good thing, trying to accommodate for more schedules. The two delegates we do have, they're familiar with the process. Just a reminder, they do have 5 minutes to make their presentation. And I would begin with Mary Patterson from REAP. Good evening, or good late afternoon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Just fine, thank you.
Great, all right. Well, thank you everyone for giving me an opportunity to speak this afternoon. I know you're making important decisions about the budget for Kitchener, and I want to speak in support of maintaining the momentum on two of the city's environmental initiatives, in particular, urban forestry and cycling. And I'll start with urban forestry. REAP supports the city's sustainable urban forestry strategy by working with residents to plant trees on private land. And it's about getting the right tree in the right place. A key part of the program is showing homeowners how to look after these trees, as well as the other mature trees that they already have. In spite of losing the spring season when COVID hit and everybody canceled and then we canceled, by the end of the fall, we saw a net increase in the number of Kitchener residents who participated in our backyard tree planting program. So we just want to let you know that there's continued interest also in the stewardship workshops, which were both online and in person with physical distancing. So we continue to see strong interest in that too. Of those surveyed, 72% of participants who planted a tree in their yard reported that they would not have planted any trees this year without the program. They say that a society grows great when old women and men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit. And I think the city is really building the Kitchener of the future with this program and leaving an important legacy to the generations that come after us. So I want to thank you for doing that. I would also like to speak to the downtown cycling grid. I remember the moment that I first heard that there was going to be a protected and continuous downtown grid, and I couldn't wait to hear more. And on this topic, I'd like to speak as both a private citizen and on behalf of REAP Green Solutions. As the executive director of REAP, I want to note the important role that active transportation will play in our upcoming climate action plan. Emissions from motor vehicles now make up 49% of our region's greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation is the single biggest nut to crack if we're going to make the 80% reduction by 2050. And key to this is addressing the emissions from short trips, which have a higher impact than longer journeys. And the fact that they're short means they're also an easier switch to make to cycling or walking, especially if we make it easy and safe. So REAP heartily supports the city's proposal for a protected and continuous downtown cycling grid as an important step towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our community. And on a personal note, as someone who walks, bikes, and occasionally drives in Kitchener, I want to say how important that word protected is to me in the description of the grid. I participated in the public consultation on the grid, and it was moving to me to see the depictions of the separated bike lanes. I could see where I belong on my bike, and that really matters. I want to say that connecting the spur line and the Iron Horse trails is really important. I have often gone between them, and it is a little tricky depending on your starting point, and we need a safe way between them. And having a continuous grid is also key. It is such a disappointment when you know your spot on the road, you've got a clearly marked trail, you get to an intersection, you cross it, and there's nothing. And you just don't feel safe. So please keep that goal in mind. So keep up the great momentum on this absolutely critical part of our active transportation infrastructure, and please phase it in as soon as possible. I believe it's scheduled for 3 years, but if it could be even sooner, that would be fantastic, knowing what we need to do by 2050. And I just finally want to say a big thanks to the city for the decision to hire a 5-person team for equity and anti-racism. Climate change has a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities. And we know we can't address that issue without addressing many other inequities. We're working on that at REAP and as part of Climate Action WR, and we applaud the city for this bold step forward. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Looking now, thank you, Ms. Patterson. There do not appear to be any questions at all. I would just add that we did hear many of your sentiments, especially about cycling, as we dealt with the cycling downtown grid earlier today. And I do see Councillor Marsh is queued in. Councillor Marsh?
Yeah. Oh, well, you were about to finish. Go ahead, Councillor Davey.
Oh no, I'm good. Go ahead.
Well, I think just to finish his sentence, I'm happy to let you know that we approved the downtown cycling grid. So it just has to be ratified at council next week, which is, highly likely. So
I'm delighted to hear that.
Great. And thank you so much for all the work that you do, and the partnerships that you have with the city are very much appreciated. Thank you very much for taking the time today as well to bring your comments, and we look forward to working with you more in the years to come.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Mayor Verbenovich.
Thanks. And Mary Jane, I just want to take an opportunity to say thank you to you as well for the great job that you and your team have been doing for many years at REAP, and for the great partners you've been with the city, and for obviously coming in tonight and sharing your thoughts on these areas. We're very much aligned in our views on those things. But you know what? I'm going to take this as an opportunity to ask you a question, because the federal government last week announced a bunch of energy efficiency programs for houses, and I think it was up to $5,000. And I'm just wondering what that means for REAP going forward and for our community.
Well, I am so glad to see it. Oh, I've been knocking on all their doors for a long time. I think this means I hope it means a big difference for Kitchener, which right now does not have incentives for its residents, whereas other parts of the areas served by Enbridge do. For REAP, we are really watching and listening. It's a bit awkward right now. They said it was retroactive to December 1st, but we don't know what is retroactive because they haven't said what incentives they are yet. I'll be really hoping that they focus on carbon as well as energy. So look at fuel switching and helping people move off of natural gas. So I think the advice they get in the next little while will be key, and we'll be seeing how we can provide input to that. What I understand is that it now goes to Natural Resources Canada to design the program, and then it goes to the Treasury Board. So it may be summer or afterwards before it launches, but we will be getting as ready as we can.
Well, hopefully sooner rather than later, because certainly I think one of the intentions of the program is to get folks in that industry, if they're not working, back to work, and that's a great way to do it. So we'll help you keep the pressure on them as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davey. And Mary Jane, I wanted to thank you so much for being here tonight, and for always being a great supporter of, or always providing us great information for what we need to do better here. One thing I'm wondering if you can answer this as a question. I know how much REAP has worked with the Friends of Lakeside Park and the whole entire Lakeside Park neighborhood on such initiatives as salt reduction on sidewalks, so we don't have salt going into the lake, into the Kettle Lake that we have there. The erosion control, tree planting, the rain gardens, etc. So you really do a lot of hands-on work in neighborhoods, and I think it's important. Maybe if you could name a few of them that I don't want to put, I am putting you on the spot, and I'm sorry, but if you could maybe name a few neighborhoods, I think that really resonates with that are listening, or maybe even expand on some of the ones I've just mentioned.
Well, I can tell you that it really takes some focused funding. So it happens when we're able to find a fantastic Trillium grant or something else, and find the neighborhoods that are going to be able to take action with that. So Mount Hope and Lakeside are the two that have really stood out as kind of setting the bar, I think. And we started with neighborhoods that were already interacting well with each other so that we could build on that. A kind of different idea of neighborhood that I could share with you is that we've been working with the KW Urban Native Wigwam Project to do upgrades to their homes. So they were one of our first clients 20 years ago. We evaluated all their homes. They have over 30. And we did that all again in 2010 and provided them with a report. And we've been coming back to them to see, have you had a chance to take action? And I think they got some funding last year from the region to address some issues. So we've been working with them on air sealing and helping them get a contractor to do some of the I forget what they're called, but they're little spray foam where it was needed. And that's been neat to help them make their homes more energy efficient, more affordable, and more comfortable. And it's a different kind of neighborhood. It's kind of spread throughout the city, but it's an example of a community that we work with.
Absolutely, and that's terrific. And as you mentioned before, we know that climate change certainly affects our low-income neighborhoods, our BIPOC residents in a different way than it affects other people. And so I think that's a wonderful initiative. I know that I've taken part a couple of years ago with REAP being able to get the home the testing done,
and the evaluation.
Take advantage of some of the subsidies that were in place at the time to do spray foam, to really do a number of different projects that up the energy efficiency of my house and was able to save money. So I'm hoping, thank you so much for advocating for that. And let's hope that those subsidies come back into play again, because I think that people, yeah, absolutely. People will really be able to benefit from those. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And again, thank you, Mary Jane, for coming in, making your presentation, and for letting us know your thoughts. Have a good evening.
All right. Bye all.
Bye now. The second delegate from Sustainable Waterloo Region, Ms. Tova Davidson.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I am Tova Davidson. I'm here from Sustainable Waterloo Region. I actually created some slides, so I don't know if we can get those up. Awesome. It's always an honor to be on the same roster as Mary Jane. So I want to sort of echo some of the things she's saying, as well as bring a couple of different thoughts to this conversation. And I really want to sort of look very, very high on the vision of what it is you're doing tonight and the ways that you can actually move forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Just keep going. That's just a pretty background. The City of Kitchener has actually demonstrated a really strong commitment to a sustainable and low carbon future. And in this past year or so, we've seen not only the declaration of a climate emergency, but that unanimous endorsement of the region-wide 80 by 50 GHG target, which Mary Jane talked about. Next slide, please. These commitments are a really big way that we are showing that this, what you're seeing right here, this footprint is something that we need to work on and focus on. And I want to just look at a couple of things here very quickly. You're very well aware of these, I'm sure. In 2010, we had a baseline year, which we did manage to bring down 5.2% by 2015. But it's really important to look at that 49% number. That's transportation. And the news that you passed the cycling grid is fantastic. I hope you all got my letter of support for that, knowing that this is a critical piece, as Mary Jane was talking about. Can you just advance, please? But this big piece is this 80 by 50 that we need to be focusing on. And the decisions you're making today will actually lead us to the possibility of this future. Next slide, please. In the Climate Action Program, which we are honored to run in partnership with REAP Green Solutions, went out to the community and we asked what their vision for 2050 was. And this came from community engagement and all over the region. And it asked, what would Waterloo Region look and feel like in 2050? Next slide. So I'm going to share some of this with you so you can actually see what the community said. This is only a portion, but their vision for 2050 is that we would be a leader of progressive action in Canada and that we would be proud of that. That we're a community where people are emboldened to make environmental choices. And the city has an important role to play in doing that. That people are moving around the region in clean and convenient, accessible, that's really important to the justice piece that Mary Jane was talking about, and active ways. Next slide, please. And maybe most importantly, we're a community that knows we're not separate from the climate, the planet, and that we contribute to and benefit from collective flourishing. That something like environmental sustainability and economic prosperity and justice and social benefits, they all work together. It's not separate. And so the budget conversations you're going to have all work together. And so I'm here to encourage you to think that way. Next slide, please. What I'm asking today is that as you're making your decisions, that you think about investing for the future. This is the time to invest to create this shared vision for the community. Cycling infrastructure means active transportation citywide, and that's a justice piece, access to good transportation. A good tree canopy includes not only drawdown of existing emissions by those trees, but adaptation measures for major water events and wind events to try to help get our community more ready for what can be coming. Next slide, please. We also know that zero carbon building retrofits equal lower greenhouse gas emissions for the whole community. And that's not only in homes, it's also in businesses and in your own buildings. And so thinking about that, and that's supporting a local business resiliency, including environmental sustainability, means a stronger and more diverse economy. And finally, that a mode shift in transportation isn't just about greenhouse gases in transportation. It's about better air quality. It's about a reduction in heat island effect. It's about better quality of life and accessible transportation for all citizens. Next slide, please. So what I'm hoping is that in this conversation, you will be integrating sustainability and a low carbon future, not as a silo of something you do, but into everything you do. It's part of transportation. It's part of recreation. It's part of social services. It's part of everything that the City of Kitchener does. And this is an opportunity for the City of Kitchener to lead the community towards a better future. The time is now. Your leadership has always been there, and I'm so proud of the work that you've done and our ability to support in any small way with that leadership. And I'm really excited about what it is you will be envisioning and enabling for the future for this amazing community. Last slide, please. So thank you. Thank you for your time, and I'm excited to see what you decide tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson, for your presentation. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. I think some of the questions you might have been asked were asked of Ms. Patterson just before you. But again, thank you very kindly for taking the time tonight to voice your opinion. We all appreciate it. Okay.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, that concludes the public input session. That's I know there's 2 sessions, but that was one of the lowest sessions I think in terms of attendance I've seen. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but hopefully we see some engagement at the follow-up session. So that concludes Finance and Corporate Services Committee. Mr. Mayor, are we going to do Community Infrastructure Services next or the special council items?
Probably let's get Community Infrastructure Services done next, if that works okay for folks.
Certainly, Councillor Ioannidis, when you're ready.
Okay. Okay, everyone, welcome to Community Infrastructure Services Committee Agenda Part 2. And we will be dealing with item number 7, which is the Ministry of Transportation and Ontario Golf Cart Path Agreement.
Councillor, I think we finished that one.
We did do that one? Okay, I checked it off, but I thought, okay, all right, good to know. Thank you for that. So we will deal with item number 8, dealing the anti-idling bylaw review. And we do have a staff presentation think Ms. McNeil.
Through the chair, no presentation, just if council has any questions.
Okay. Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ioannidis, and thank you, Ms. McNeil, for being here tonight. I did have a couple of questions, and first of all, I just wanted to just say thank you so much for taking this back to your team and having a really thorough consideration of taking a look at an anti-idling bylaw and how we can put one in place that is thoughtful, that is achievable, that will help educate the community. So I really think that that's what you've tried to come up with here. So thank you so much for that. And it's actually really great that this item is now following the presentations that we just had from Mary Jane and Tova and talking about transportation, and 49% of our emissions actually come from transportation. So my question that I had about this was, thank you, by the way, for a real concentration on the impact of school zones. I think that that's really important. Many people are driving to neighborhoods and are sitting in their cars with kids with the cars idling for quite a while. When I first brought this idea to council, it was working with a resident on this, and one of her concerns was around company vehicles or work vehicles in neighborhoods. And just taking a look at this, I know that you put in here commercial vehicles and rules around kind of the temperatures that they can then have their cars going, but they have to be occupied. So what about whenever a company vehicle is sitting and it's idling and no one is in it, but they're doing work kind of around there?
Through the chair, so what we found when we reached out to some of our counterparts who have idling bylaws is that there are circumstances when they're the work they're doing or the equipment that they're running off of these vehicles are required to run. So the vehicle is required to idle in order to operate that equipment. So that's what we have tried to focus on through that exemption list, was the type of scenarios where it's required to idle for a specific reason, not just because somebody doesn't want to turn the vehicle off. So we've tried to be cognizant of the fact that there are going to be situations that are going to require people to idle, whether it's their mobile office or whether they're operating equipment or refrigeration unit, but it shouldn't just be for any reason at all.
Yeah, thank you. And I totally agree with that as well. So I'm wondering then if, because we didn't exempt that, if we said that it's occupied, then that means then that people can call in about unoccupied vehicles that don't appear to be running, say, a refrigeration unit or something. Just want to be clear about that piece.
Right. So through the chair, I think, so staff can go back and have a look at that. But I think the focus of this was, for example, a refrigeration, like a vehicle or a truck that's running and operating a refrigerated unit because there's cargo in there, wouldn't necessarily be occupied, but would be required to operate. So I think we've tried to be fairly broad in terms of what those exemptions look like. But yeah, we could have a better look at some of that. And it was never the intent to allow a vehicle to idle for no reason while it sits empty. So we can just have a better look to make sure that we've captured that.
Yeah, that would be great. And one last piece then. I know that that's something you've worked really hard at addressing, and I think it's probably going to be the toughest piece of this is the enforcement piece. Often by the time that someone calls by law, a car will have left, or when they would see someone, a bylaw officer show up, they're going to turn their car off, etc. So So definitely we know that that is going to happen. So I think the education piece is important. How can we maybe beef up that piece? Is there a communications piece that would go hand in hand with this so that it might have more education and enforceability then?
Through the chair, I think that's exactly what we need. I think we need to do a communications plan to support this when it comes forward. I also think we need to do a period of education, and whether that's supported with some brochures or some pamphlets or something we can hand out to people in the beginning in order to let people know that we do now have an idling bylaw, and what the regulations are, but also what the consequences if people fail to comply with that. So I definitely think a communications plan would be required with this.
Yeah, that's great. And I would love it if we tie it in with some of the, some of the information maybe that we could get from a community partner like REAP or something. I think that piece would be really important, that here's the overall reason why we also want to work on this as well. It's not just so bylaw can come and tell you off, but here's what the picture is about idling, and here's what it means to our environment would be great. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Mayor Verbanovic.
Thanks, Chair Ioannidis. I don't believe anyone's moved this yet, so I'd be pleased to move it and briefly speak to it. I will support this. In fact, this is something that originally came out of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Air Quality, and at the time there was a fair bit of discussion around it, and we started with signage and education approach at community centers and different areas where idling was an issue, because it was felt that made the most sense, as opposed to creating a bylaw that maybe wasn't going to be enforced in a significant way. And so I think it would make, we're now at a time, particularly with our commitment to the Paris Agreement with the other municipalities in the region, and our commitment to 80-50, 80% reduction by 2050 and so on. This makes a whole lot of sense. So I'm pleased to support it. And in fact, I believe Councillor Johnson wanted to move it, so I'm happy to set aside and let her move it, and I'll just support it. So thank you.
Thanks. I would love to move it. I forgot to. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we have no further questions. Then we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That looks like it's carried unanimously. Okay, thanks. So we're going to go now to item number 9, dealing with the user fee reduction due to COVID-19 and red control restrictions.
So moved.
Do we have a presentation for that? I didn't go back to my notes to see if we do or not.
No, it's not necessary.
Okay. So do we have any okay. Geez, I looked off my screen and there's 3 questions. So I'll just go. I don't know who went first here. So let's go with Councillor Davey since he's first on the list here.
I didn't see who was second, but I think I actually was first. At any rate, yeah, I'm happy to support this. I just have my concern because I'm involved with Kitchener Minor Hockey. I don't think it's a conflict, but I'm being transparent about it. But I've seen the transition from situations where you have 2 teams of 17 kids on the ice to now essentially 10. So it doesn't take long to figure out that the costs have more than doubled per player to be able to play. So my concern, and the report touches upon it, is that there's a fear that we may see that people are saying it's just too expensive, forget it, and this is what that's trying to address. But I just want to make sure that's captured in here, that if we start seeing the numbers fall off and people are not even using the facility at all, the last thing I think myself, this council wants to see is the facilities sitting mostly empty when we'd love to have people using them. So what's the response to that concern?
So through you, I think, sorry, Chair Ioannidis is that part. We got caught up in the switchover, so we didn't have an active link, but so through Chair Ioannidis. So yeah, we are to monitor what's happening with the ICE users. So as long as they can participate and offer their programming, we'll be looking at monitoring that. So we did talk with both skating and minor hockey around what we were proposing for the rate, and they felt that it was in line. And then we're also looking at adding some public skates for those that don't participate in recreational organized team sport, so that they have an opportunity to still come out and enjoy some ice skating as well. So we've taken care of that. That user fee, we didn't do a differential on. We left those set at the regular fee. And then we also have some users in some of our other facilities that are non-ice, and we have applied that discount for them as well.
Okay, very good. And we do have a week before we ratify this, so I'm not sure if you're prepared to answer it now, but I would also like to give staff the discretion to, ideally in a transparent way, to bonus out maybe some ice time to user groups of staff's choosing, because like, again, the other thing I don't want to see, if we have staff at a facility already and then we'll have a gap of 2 hours of ice time where it sits empty, I'd rather see that ice time get used. So if you're not prepared to respond to that today, that's fine, but I would like to have a response for that sort of situation by council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. Yeah, I had some similar questions. I wanted to know how did you arrive at 28%? It's not exactly in the middle of where everybody else is, between 25 and 50%. And so I would love, it sounds like you've already discussed it and the user groups are fine with it, but it would be great if you could let us know, or if we can give you, like Councillor Davey was suggesting, the leeway to negotiate rates at a lower rate if needed.
So through you, Chair Ioannidis. So when we have oversupply, we actually have the ability from a previous council resolution to do supply and demand. So if things are looking like there might be some opportunity to move some ice. So we have had some ice sales before we even hit COVID. So we do those kind of slice of ice for a reduced rate. So we do have that flexibility. What we were really trying to do is give the user groups that are our regular users a fee that they can budget and base their programming on. So we will work with them if that becomes too strenuous to deal with. We chose our figure by looking not at the percentage. We actually looked at the dollar value that we were charging per the ice. All of us have a scale of different rates. So some of the townships are as low as $79, and then some of the other communities are $140 to $128, and Kitchener fell in at 107. So we're right in the middle of the pack. So it wasn't the percentage we were targeting, it was actually what the dollar value that the sport groups were going to pay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I'm of the same mindset of both Councillor Davey and Marsh. It gives me some relief, as Kim just mentioned, that I believe staff already do have the discretion that they can discount further based on the demand. And I think that's how we have to see it. Similar to what Councillor Davey has said, it makes no sense for these facilities to just sit empty because of the financial constraint that they may be facing. If we have the means, then we should look at, obviously due to the circumstance of the pandemic, of discounting further if the rationale arises. The question I did still have, though, was based on the recovery on some of this subsidy. Would this fall under, based on some funding that the province may or the feds may make available? Could this be part of the recovery funding that we could apply for?
I will let Financial Services speak to that one.
So through the chair, in terms of any kind of program that's available right now, there's nothing that has been announced, but certainly it could be something that, a future program might address. Certainly the Safe Restart funding that we looked at we are trying to recapture some of our lost revenue, and that's obviously related to 2020. It remains to be seen in terms of if additional programs in 2021 would be released that would allow us to claim some of these lost revenues as part of making these kinds of concessions.
Thus far, have we been hearing any communication from the province, if or any order of government, if some relief will be provided in 2021?
There hasn't been any concrete sort of direction yet in terms of whether relief is coming in terms of operating dollars. Certainly, we'll be looking to advocate for additional funding as we move into 2021. But it is something that we are watching closely, and as announcements get made, we are making council aware of them, and we'll continue to do those advocacy efforts because we do believe that funding will still be required in 2021 to support municipalities.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And I would be very supportive of this, and I think it only makes sense. And I repeat my earlier comment that if additional relief needs to be provided to these sports groups, I think we need to be more than willing to assist.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, when does this become effective?
Through you, Chair Ioannidis. So the effective rate would be for while they're in the red zone. So it would have, it will be retroactive of the day that we went into the players being limited to 10.
So are we looking at the month of December then?
Actually, I believe it was November 25th, but I can confirm that.
That's okay. What is it going to cost the community on a monthly basis?
We did put an estimate into the report as far as if everything stayed status quo. It would cost us
$12,500 a week. I just saw that.
$499.
Yeah. Okay. Was any consideration given of biting the bullet and just closing the inside facilities? We've only got a few more months to go before a vaccine. Could we not hang on for a few months?
So through you, Chair Ioannidis, what we have done is we've tried to consolidate our facilities. So we didn't actually put ice in all of the arenas. We're trying to balance out mental health and making sure that we have activities for youth to participate in, as well as the community. So at this point, we feel that we're booking and using our facilities. We are looking at maybe streamlining a little bit around the use of Grand River. We had a lot of adult rentals there. And so with the recent change around training only, we're trying to see if we can consolidate. It just takes us a little bit of time to work with the groups to make that change happen.
What if you close down completely? How many people would be affected?
In an average day, 5 hours, over 50 per rink. And then on the weekends, you're probably looking at 12 hours, 10 people, 120. So roughly 700 people a week.
So, and they could be, some of those could be the same people, right?
Well, that would be based on a rink, and you multiply that by the 6 rinks surfaces that are going.
Well, okay, going back to my question, was any consideration given to closing down? So
we have looked at consolidating Grand River right now, so we're watching what's happening. The challenge we have is that as we progress through the categories, there's an interest in the community for the adults to get back out and do some more recreational skate and hockey. And so if we have that ability to do that, the challenge if we drop our ice will take us longer to actually rebuild it than just to sit quiet for the 28 days that we're watching how the community does.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just to be really clear, we thought about it and we thought it was a bad idea. We do believe that the physical health and well-being of especially youth in our community is really important right now. So we ruled it out, and that's why the recommendation is before you.
That's the question I was asking. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Zola. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kim, I want to thank you for this report and for working so hard to keep some arenas open. This is really important to our community. It's important to kids. I'm really delighted that we're doing a program, maybe enhancing it a bit more to get volunteers for outdoor ice rinks, and the staff are out trying to get the boards up in all the parks. This is important that we do this. This is part of our jobs to keep this community healthy, especially during a time when everybody is stuck in the house and has to, everything has been constrained. So I'm really pleased that staff has been able to do this and keep these arenas open. And I think this is a good thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Ioannidis. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that as well. I think one of the, and this is something certainly that I know I've chatted about with Mr. Chapman and others on our team is the importance of the mental health and well-being of both our staff and our community. And I think just echoing the comments of Councillor Michaud on that issue, that is one of the most important roles for us to play right now, and need to be creative in finding as many possible ways for people to engage and participate. For some, that's hockey. For others, that's being able to take advantage of walking through the Huron Natural Area, or perhaps enjoying the lights in Victoria Park right now. But it really is extremely important. I can't tell you the number of people I have heard from who appreciate the efforts that this council and our city have gone to in order to look after the well-being of our community, because it is a particularly challenging time. And it's often those who have the least amount of resources who aren't able to build the ice rink at home because they don't have a backyard, or aren't able to build a gym in their basement because they don't have the financial resources and so on, that really are counting on our ability to try to keep as much of this going as possible. So I want to thank staff for their efforts, and certainly would not be supportive in any way of unnecessarily shutting facilities down.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you. And along that same line, I'm wondering if Ms. Kugler could maybe give us an update on, I know we've been asking for a number of volunteers to help build outdoor rinks at our community centers. I know that it's something I put on my Twitter feed and my Facebook feed, looking for people to help at the Victoria Hills Community Center and my ward, for instance. Do you know, have we found people to help with most of our rinks? You might not know that I didn't ask you this ahead of time, so my apologies. But even if you just say, we need more help, please help at every rink would be great.
So Lori-Ann Polobeski and now Lobley's teams actually take care of the outdoor rinks, but I will definitely put in a plug. They are still looking for some volunteers. There's still a few rinks that could use some volunteers to help with the winter rinks this winter. So thank you for the time for the plug, and I'm sure that they will appreciate that greatly.
Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola, you have further questions?
Comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I try to make a simple little comment that I'm not opposed to where we're going, but I wish, if someone asks a question as to whether something was considered, it doesn't mean that they believe that's the direction they were going to ask everybody to go. So, really, by me asking that question, I gave a lot of you an opportunity to speak out well on this topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gazzola. Okay, with all that, we have no further comments or questions. I don't really have much of a comment, except I'll be supporting. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so we have one last business. It's unfinished business, and it's dealing with Councillor Chapman's motion for, where are my notes? I don't know where I wrote it down this time. So it's dealing with I guess a traffic study, or if Ms. Chapman can, Councillor Chapman can repeat what she, or can she if she has a written thing for us to look at, and then we can vote on whether or not we will proceed further with this.
Mr. Chair, didn't we vote on that amendment already, or that motion?
No.
I thought there was something from Councillor Chapman we had voted and defeated.
Well, no, she had two motions. One was in relative to the item that was being discussed, while this one isn't really relative to the item that was being discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, you want me to go ahead?
Sure.
Is Mr. Bunn still here? He had it in a file if you wanted to put it up. Otherwise, I can read it. I'm happy either way.
Okay, I think Mr. Bunn can. I don't think he's on here. So why don't you read it?
Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. It says that staff bring forward a report that outlines the cost scope of a transportation master plan in the Victoria Park area that could be conducted during phase 2 of the grid installation. So it's not a study, it's costing it out to see if it makes sense to do a transportation master plan in the Victoria Park area.
Okay, Mayor Verbanovic.
Just a question of staff, if I can. What's the amount of workload that would be required here? I believe Mr. Cronkite indicated earlier it would impact some other work that would need to be done, or that's already in the work plan or in the strat plan.
Through the chair. So there is a little bit of additional work that staff have committed to in terms of pausing the Water Street cul-de-sac component of the downtown grid. And so part of that would be working through that, those details on the impacts and seeing what the impacts are of installing sort of that phase 1 component. If we're looking at a broader transportation study for the whole Victoria Park neighborhood, there is a potential that it would delay things like, so I've lost my train of thought, Vision Zero and other studies, because the resource that would be leading that would potentially be pulled off that work, which is a broader citywide initiative.
So other things that council's already approved and that are part of our work plan over the next couple of years would be impacted by this?
Potentially. And so if we're just reporting back on the costs and implications, that's something that staff could do. But if we're actually going down the path of looking at a transportation study for a neighborhood, that would potentially impact other work that council's already committed to.
So would it be very basic for you to be able to bring back to council I believe we're scheduled next week, what a cost range might be for something like this, and any other information on impacts before we formally deal with it?
I can work with staff to see if that is possible, and maybe update council by email. Sorry, Mr. Cronkite isn't on the call right now, and he was looking to potentially rejoin to answer questions, but I'm not sappy enough to answer these while trying to get him the link for this call because we're on a different meeting call right now.
Sure, no problem. But something like the cost range of a transportation master plan for something like Victoria Park is something we'd likely be relatively familiar with based on other similar pieces of work.
Through the chair, yes, I believe we can bring something that outlines the cost and the scope for a potential body of work and what implications that has on other bodies of work.
So even though we have, however we deal with this today, it would, well, I guess if it doesn't pass, it would, it wouldn't come back to council next week. If it does pass, it would have to come back to council next week. I'd suggest that maybe we simply refer it and staff give us that additional information, and then council maybe can vote on it based on actually having that knowledge and deciding if it's something, you know, based on the scope and the timing, if it's something we want to consider in light of the other work that would be impacted.
Through the chair, so I do have a response from Mr. Cronkite, and he's indicating that bringing back even rough costing by next council meeting is not doable. So this isn't something that's typically done on this scale, and so we don't have reference points for the City of Kitchener on what that costing would be. So we need a little bit more time to explore it than this upcoming council meeting.
Okay, well then that's a different set of circumstances. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I don't see, oh, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is not to try and do it in a week, but that's why it's saying during phase 2, which I think is 2022. So just for clarification, so it would give staff the time to, I guess what you're proposing, Mayor Brnovich, would require then moving into the master plan, but that's not what's being proposed here. It's getting the costing of and the scope of such a plan and seeing whether it's whether it makes sense. So
you want to bring the costing back by 2022?
Well, that's the way it's worded here, and this wording came with the help of Mr. Cronkite. So he saw this as something that was workable. So yeah,
Point of information.
It's not to approve the master plan today or Monday. It's to move forward in looking at, first of all, the costing of a master plan, and then if it makes sense, then going ahead with the master plan.
Go ahead, Councillor Marsh.
Point of information, just Mr. Cronkite is in the waiting room. If somebody wants to let him in, maybe he can help answer. And I will have.
Mr. Cronkite?
Yes. Good evening, everybody.
Welcome, Barry.
To give you some sense in terms of what, and I caught a bit of what Debbie was saying just prior to joining the call. To give you some sense of what Debbie and I had chatted about briefly with this one is not necessarily to conduct a master plan for the entirety of Victoria Park, a transportation master plan, but rather than conducting the plan itself, rather than scope out and get an understanding of cost of what that would look like. So it's not something that we can turn around in a week. Staff would need some time to really understand what the scope of a transportation master plan would look like for a regional district park like this. And at the same time, we would need a little bit, we've never done a study like this, so it would be a little bit of effort on our end to understand the cost implications as well. So if we were to look at something like this, you know, in terms of this motion, it would be bringing forward a report at a later date that would outline the conditions of a transportation master plan for Victoria Park, what it would review, and what the cost of that review would be. And I would think staff would need quite a bit of time to be able to pull that together. We need to have an understanding of what that study is.
Okay. Councillor Davey, questions or?
Yeah, just a question now that Mr. Cronkite's back. I just wanted clarification as well. Mr. Cronkite, you or your staff, if you had identified that traffic was going to be an issue, would this sort of study not have been part of the recommendation?
Absolutely. So when we were looking at the protected cycling infrastructure, we don't see the changes to the grid impacting Victoria Park to any great degree. However, when Councillor Chapman and I chatted about this, it was really a reflection of what we heard from the residents, that there is an existing condition within the park with transportation safety concerns. And so the idea of bringing a motion like this forward is really, in my mind, separate from the grid itself. So I want to be very clear with that component. I see this as a very separate exercise. It's not related to the protected cycling infrastructure.
Okay. I just have a few questions. So I just wanted to, Barry, you did mention that this has never been done before. This is like a first for a neighborhood, like with like it seems out of the ordinary. So like, can you just elaborate further on that?
Yes, absolutely. So it may not be the first of its kind ever necessarily, but in terms of the Kitchener context, we haven't taken a neighborhood such as this and reviewed the overall transportation impacts. And so going into a study like this, we'd be considering things like events in the park and how that impacts the neighborhood, and overall traffic conditions and the link of Jubilee Drive between Park Street and Cortland Avenue, just to give some sense of what would be in a master plan. But again, in my mind, this is completely separate from the grid itself, and it's something that council can consider. I would encourage council to consider on its own merits, whether or not it's something that they see value in to really think about the traffic conditions in the park.
Okay. And I guess my last question would be regards to, would this be somewhat jumping the queue for traffic studies in general, or the traffic calming process that we have policy in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great point, Councillor Ioannidis. This is, this would be in lieu of a traffic calming review, but at the same time, a review like this could have very similar outcomes. So would it be jumping the queue? In my mind, that's probably a fair assessment. So if we were to look at these roadways in this neighborhood in terms of a formal traffic calming review, I can say with 100% certainty that they're not going to meet that requirement. They're not going to be in the top tier in terms of what we would be looking at, nor would they likely screen in, because the 85th percentiles on all these streets are going to be much too low.
Okay, thank you. I won't take much more of your time, so I'll just deal with these last few members. Mayor Vrbanovic.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Cronkite. So just as a follow-up, is it fair to say that your division is already fairly taxed in terms of the workload that council has already approved through the both the strategic plan and the corporate work plan, and this would come at the if council ultimately approved it, would come at the expense of something else?
Yeah, through the chair, this would result in terms of that expense, it would be at the direct expense of the Vision Zero report that we had initially intended on bringing forward at the end of 2021. Any work put into this will be from the same staff person, so it results in an equal delay to Vision Zero.
And if we normally the process to consider something like this, would it be that council would raise these issues with you, and staff would look to see whether it sort of bubbles up, or where it ends up landing in the priorities as you just identified, from a traffic calming point of view overall?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of a plan like this, you would typically see it as part of a business plan or the city strategic plan. The sense it wasn't included in those documents, so I wouldn't put a high priority on this necessarily, if that kind of gives you some sense.
Yeah, so in light of that, I'm wondering if this is best dealt with or referred to the next business plan update process, and considered at that time. And I'm not sure when that is. I know there's a certain amount of capacity that's always left for the future.
In terms of those strategic business planning processes, this is definitely that would definitely be a better fit for a plan like this rather than an ad hoc plan, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I see no further questions. So I guess what we'll do is we'll vote on the motion, because I don't see anything contrary to that. So
Recorded vote, Mr. Chair, if we could.
okay. Let's go with the individuals that I have on the screen. So Councillor Singh.
Opposed.
Mayor Urbanovic.
Opposed.
Councillor Davey.
Opposed.
Councillor Marsh.
Opposed.
Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Councillor Marsh.
I get to vote twice. That's
Oh, sorry, I looked at Councillor Margaret Johnson. I was looking at RMR and I got confused with Marsh.
I'm opposed.
Councillor Michaud.
I'm opposed.
Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Councillor Schneider.
Opposed.
Councillor Galloway Seelock.
I'm opposed.
And I am the last, and I am opposed as well. So that motion is defeated, and with that, it concludes our Community Infrastructure Services meeting. And I guess we'll all meet back here at, we have other orders, so I'll pass it over to you, Mayor Urbanovic.
So Council, it's now 6:22. Would you like to leave special council until after the planning meeting, or do you want to try to get through it now?
Let's get through it now.
Let's go through.
Okay. So I will deal with, first of all, the Region of Waterloo All Council meeting dates. So this is number 2, which is Thursday, December 17th, which is a typical all council meeting. And then on the 2 dates of Friday, December 18th or January 8th are for education and training. So does somebody want to move that? Moved by Councillor Singh, thank you. Second by Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? Was that an in favor and opposed, Councillor Galloway Seelock? Oh, that in favor. Okay, thank you. And then
Mayor Urbanovic, can I ask a quick question about that?
Go ahead.
Just this one clarification. The 18th and the 8th are the same session. So is it just up to our council members which one works better for them, or are we being encouraged to all go to one or the other?
I'm wondering if staff can, Mr. Chapman, can you help with that, or Ms. McGoldrick?
Yeah, I'd look for Ms. McGoldrick to provide that clarification.
Not sure if I see.
I'm fine with it being in an email, Mr. Mayor.
We'll follow up with an email to people. Okay. Thanks, Councillor Marsh, for asking that. So that's carried. Now we'll go back to number 1, COVID-19 resilience funding. There is a recommendation there, and this is part of the funding that we're getting from the federal and provincial governments with a specific allocation, which was 1.55 million. Councillor Singh, you have your hand up.
Yeah, happy to move that. I had a question from staff as well on the, glad to see that we're looking at utilizing some of this grant for paving of or asphalting trails. Would staff be able to reference any, or that would come at a later work in prioritizing trails?
So through the mayor, the trails are identified in Appendix A in terms of what's being proposed. So Kingsway to Vanier, Fisher Holman to Westmount, and Westmount to Lawrence are the 3 trails that are being proposed. And then Lynn Valley Park Bridge is the other priority that's recommended to be replaced.
Okay, all right. I don't know if the appropriate staff are available now. And some of you may recall a while back as part of the Country Hills Aaron Brook Trails Network that was initially asphalted and is currently winter maintained as a pilot project. And some of this work has originated from that initial pilot project. There were small stretches along the community center going towards the school. I think about 600 meter of a stretch that I had tried to prioritize or asphalt in the I think it was a 2018 budget. But at that point, it defeated basically on the sense that, the work is undergoing for the master plan for the parks and trails and cycling master plan. The fact that we're moving forward with asphalting additional trails now, is this an opportunity for me to reference that segment that was missed at that point?
Good evening, members of council, and through you, Mayor Vrabanovich. Yes, Paul, that is a trail which we've got on the list. I was actually just trying to pull up the detailed list of where that falls in the budget horizon. I can connect with you offline on that one. It's not one that we put forward for this bundle of works at this point in time, but that is a trail that's in there.
Okay. Again, as I was saying, it's a very small little segment, but it is a missing link on a body of good work that was already done in that neighborhood as an improvement towards Trails Network there. So I'm glad to hear that will be addressed. Thank you. Happy to move this, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, why is no one? It would help if I unmuted myself. Apologies, everyone. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we've dealt with that. Bylaw for 3 readings, moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Schneider. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Johnson. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we will see you all back at 7 for planning. Thanks, everyone. Well done.